up, book lovers? It is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about my favorite books in the first half of 2023. So if you didn't know, this is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out and you can participate in a topic in the future, or you can suggest a topic. And we have reached the halfway point of the year, which means lists! I mean, I like making lists, and I am here to bring the topics for those who want to participate in the topics. I always look forward to making this video because I love looking back at a portion of the year, seeing what worked for me, what did not work for me. I mean, what I mostly like about it is when I go on my book tracking spreadsheet for the year and then filter out anything that was below 4 stars and just look at the books that I have really loved so far this year. And whenever I look at those numbers, I just am transported back to how I felt about the book at the time, or I just pick books based on the way that I felt about them regardless of rating. I have one of those, and one of those is probably going to be like really shocking, but I had a good reading experience overall, so that's why I've put it on this list. Right now I am going to go through my favorite reading experiences of the year so far. I guess without further ado, let's get straight into this list. Actually, just a quick disclaimer before we start. This list is not in any particular order. The final order will be at the end of the year. I honestly cannot decide what my favorites are at the moment. I really just need to take the time at the end of the year to do that. But right now, I'm not pressuring myself to do that. I mean, that's just too much brain power. So the first book I have to mention that was one of my favorites for the year so far is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. Fun fact, this was the first book I read this year, and it was an instant 5-star. This book was a very thrilling experience, but also I very much appreciate the message of this book. I actually thought that it was going to end in some sort of tragedy, and yes, while the ending is bittersweet, it is ultimately satisfying. I wish I could follow Constanta for more books. I would love a spin-off just following Constanta again and her adventures. She is definitely a very inspiring character, and I just appreciated following her journey, and I loved seeing the side characters in here. I especially love Alexi. Oh my goodness, Alexi is my baby. I was absolutely addicted, so hooked to it. I devoured this book in one sitting, and I fell in love with this Dracula reimagining, and I just want to dive back in, but I've decided that I am going to dive back in somewhere closer toward Halloween. Because this book actually came out November of last year, I could not read it during Halloween period. However, that will be different this year. I am planning to read this around Halloween period because I want to experience the creepiness of this book again. I highly recommend it to absolutely everyone if you're wanting a good, compelling Halloween read, but also a story of survival and persistence. A Dowry of Blood is one I recommend. And a book I read soon after A Dowry of Blood was Poster Girl by Veronica Roth. This also came in my Adult Fairy Loot subscription. I, at the time, was actually considering unsubscribing to Adult Fairy Loot. I'm still like unsure about what subscriptions I will be keeping for the sake of my budget. However, I wasn't really too keen on Adult Fairy Loot last year. That being said, I was still very excited to see that Veronica Roth was included in their subscription. And this happened to be the October book pick of the month last year, and A Dowry of Blood ended up being the November book pick of the month. And I'm glad to say that 2 months in a row happened to be 5 out of 5-star reads for me. Veronica Roth was already a favorite author of mine. However, I had really low expectations for Poster Girl because, in case you didn't know, it's a really short book. This book, I believe, is under 300 pages. 269 pages this hardback is. This book is half the size of Chosen Ones, and if you guys don't know, Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth is probably my favorite book by Veronica Roth at the moment. I do love Divergent, and the Divergent trilogy will always hold a special place in my heart because that series got me into reading. However, Chosen Ones, I'd have to say, in recent times, is my favorite book by Veronica Roth. That all being said, Veronica Roth was coming out with Poster Girl, and I was nervous about it because it was half the length of Chosen Ones, and I'm still waiting on the Chosen One sequel. Veronica, TikTok, like I need it. The book series deals with the multiverse. Like, it pretty much reminds me of Into the Spider-Verse, and I really appreciate it for that aspect. However, while Poster Girl has a very different premise from Chosen Ones, I do appreciate that Veronica took some themes from Chosen Ones and took some themes from Divergent and put them into Poster Girl and just made this perfect dystopian standalone story. And I feel so satisfied by the story. I'm actually very pleasantly surprised. I thought that finishing this novel off, I would want a full-length series. However, this 260 169-page story was a perfect length, and I'm so happy that I read it. I was engaged the entire time. I could not put this book down. I believe I read this book within like 1 or 2 sittings. I was addicted to it, probably not to the same capacity as A Dowry of Blood, but very close. And I think it was also because Veronica Roth's signature writing style is very familiar to me, so it feels like home. And my next favorite book series of the year was one that really surprised me. The Bonds That Tie series by J. Bree kind of took over my life for quite some time. It still has technically taken over my life because me and my friends keep on making references to the series, and I really appreciate following along with other readers' reading journeys. Look, this is just pure guilty pleasure stuff. This series reminds me of the time I was reading Shatter Me from the beginning. Shatter Me was a guilty pleasure of mine. This is a dark romance version of Shatter Me, where essentially there's a why choose romance involved. The world building is not great. The story, it's okay. However, I am so invested in the drama that happens in this series. I still think about it to this day, and I just think to myself, I really wish I was invested in relationships like I was with the series again. I mean, I still get invested in bookish relationships, but for some reason, the Bonds That Tie series just hit differently, you know? Also, I cannot forget that one day I read 2 of these books, the next day I read 3 of them, and then I finished the final one on the 3rd day. I binge read the series within 3 days, and honestly, for a 6-book series, that is ridiculous, but I did it. So based on reading experience alone, this book series is a favorite of the first half of the year. I don't know where it's gonna rank by the end of the year. We will see. I'll see if I have a similar or more extreme reading experience than this book series, but this reading experience will always hold a special place in my heart, and I'm so happy that I also got to do this reading experience with Abby and Sasha as well, even though I technically devoured the book series first. We, at some point, were reading it at a similar time, and I like it when they message me about the series every once in a while as well. And speaking of books that I would message the group chat about, I also read Praise by Sarah Kate this year. This is the first book in the Salacious Players Club, and Sash has been pushing me to read the series. As I'm filming this, I've already read the first book, but she has pushed me to continue on with the series. I really want to, but I'm kind of waiting for the trad published paperbacks to come out for the rest of the series as well. I will continue on with the series eventually. I'm a sucker for making sure that all the books are on my shelves before I continue on with them. I don't know, that's just me. I'm weird like that. But I met Sarah Kate at Babe as well, and she was absolutely lovely. She signed and personalized my book, and she also put a praise there. Good girl. Yeah, that was very sweet. But I really love Praise a lot because it is a great and healthy introduction to kink that I've never seen before in a romance novel. Even though the premise for this book seems to be one for an erotic novel, this is very much a romance contemporary novel, or at least in structure it is. There isn't just spice, there's a lot of plot. I also appreciate how certain things are dealt with within the story. I believe that Sarah Kate dealt with the subject matter at hand in a very good way. It is an age gap romance, and the thing about age gap romances is if they're not done well, if healthy communication is not established, I personally get concerned because I just wonder whether or not the relationship will be healthy going forward if they haven't established things early in the relationship. And I really appreciate how Sarah Kate kind of dealt with that. So I really love Praise. I've only read the first book in the Salacious Players Club, but I have a feeling I'm going to love the rest of the series, and I reckon that this is definitely going to be one of my favorite series of the year. We will see. But this is definitely one of the best books I've read this year. However, the next book series I have to mention that is one of my favorites that I've read this year is also a romance contemporary, but it does not go into the kinky direction, but it is a very wholesome book series, and that, my friends, is the Bergman Brothers series by Chloe Leese. I devoured this book series within a week or 10 days. I'm trying to remember, but what I do know is that I devoured all of the 6 books that are currently out so quickly. I did not know whether or not this book series was going to be my favorite from book 1, but as soon as I started book 2, I just knew that book 2 was going to be a 5 out of 5 stars. Majority of the books that I have read in the series are a 5 out of 5 stars. I think one of the books in the series I did not see as a favorite, and I think the reason why I did not see it as a favorite was also the reason why I liked Praise, but the opposite reason. I did not love how the age gap romance was done in there, and I reckon that they could have had more discussions and more relationship development before the book ended. However, that all being said, the rest of the Bergman Brothers series did not bother me at all. I am absolutely obsessed with this series, and I will recommend this series to absolutely everyone. If you are a romance lover, and if you just don't know where to start in terms of healthy contemporary romance books, then I would highly recommend you read the Bergman Brothers series, because this series is so good. The relationships in here are so healthy, and I am so obsessed. This was also a good breakaway series for me because at the time that I was reading the series, I was reading it in the middle of reading the Crave series by Tracy Wolff, and every single time I was exhausted from the density and intensity of the Crave series, I picked the Bergman Brothers series up, and I was just so happy to go to it for comfort and for just some lightness. This series is a perfect palate cleanser. It's definitely a great series for those who are struggling with a reading slump. It was so good. I highly recommend this series, and if I don't stop talking about it, then I won't stop talking about it for the rest of the video. But I'm gonna go on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. Look, okay, I recommend the Bergman Brothers series to absolutely everyone, and I firmly believe that the series has very healthy romance representation. However, I cannot say the same thing for the next book series that I'm gonna bring up on this list today. And look, I'm bringing this book series up purely because I enjoyed my reading experience of it. However, I cannot morally recommend this book series whatsoever. I am not going to go out there and say that you should read this book series. If you want to give it a try, please look at the trigger warnings first. Your mental health does matter here. This book series was really hard to read. Particularly the second book for me was really hard to read. However, I cannot deny that my reading experience of the cat and mouse duet was entertaining. It was an entertaining read. I was compelled. Look, I went into this book series purely just wanting adrenaline, and that's what I got. I did go into this book series understanding that there wasn't going to be a healthy representation of romance. And look, if you are wanting healthy romance representation, run away. This book series is not for you. Go read the Bergman Brothers instead, okay? I am telling you right now, read the Bergman Brothers instead if you want good, healthy relationships. If you are wanting to read a dark romance with a healthy relationship, the cat and mouse duet is not going to give that to you. But the cat and mouse duet was really compelling. I did like following Adeline. I hate Zaid, but at the very same time, I cannot help but want to keep reading about him. That's what I find so absurd about the series. One thing that I will always kind of admire about my reading experience with the series was how I reacted when I got to certain points to Camilo. I know that a lot of people will do reading vlogs for this series. I had someone ask me if they should do a reading vlog for this series, and I said, if you want to do a reading vlog for the series, you can do it. Just capture your reactions as soon as possible. I did not do a reading vlog for the series. I decided to just read it. However, I shared all of my reactions with Camilo, and then later on I shared them with my friends. I cannot forget the way that I reacted to the series, and I also filmed my first thoughts about the series initially. However, I think the thing about the cat and mouse duet is that it kind of manipulates you in the future to think that you had the best time reading it. And you know what? I kind of feel like I had the best time reading it, but at the very same time, the entire series was purely written for shock factor. As soon as I will reread it, I will go back and understand that, oh, as much as I really enjoyed aspects of the story, they at the very same time are pretty messed up. A side note, I did meet H.G. Carlton at Babe, and she was absolutely lovely. She signed my book, she signed a few of my books. I had a great time meeting her, but at the very same time, I did tell her that she messed with my sleeping schedule, because this book series did mess with my sleeping schedule. You know what? It's kind of a similar situation to my reading experience with the Bonds That Tie series, except with the Bonds That Tie series, I found a majority of the characters quite likable. I'm not saying that I did not like reading about the characters here. However, Zaid, you know, at times he really annoyed me. But at the very same time, because I'm so far removed from my reading experience, even though it has been a few weeks, it's so easy to forget how unlikable he was. I think it's Stockholm, you know what? It's Stockholm Syndrome. It is Stockholm Syndrome. I think I'm a victim of Stockholm Syndrome and I need to get help. And you know what? The same thing can kind of be said for Bewitched by Laura Falasa. So Bewitched follows a witch who every single time uses her magic, she will lose her memories. And she happened to forget someone really important in her life, like the love of her life. Except there's something about the guy that is meant to make you feel uneasy. And I'm not gonna lie, I really liked Memnon to a point, but at the very same time, I'm so conflicted about liking him because you can tell that the guy is morally gray. What I appreciate about Bewitched is that as you start to read it, if you have read Rhapsodic, it feels familiar. But as you proceed to read it, it starts to remind you that Laura Falasa was not only the author of Rhapsodic and Bargainer trilogy, she was also the author of the Four Horsemen series. And it shows. Bewitched was definitely one of my favorite books this year, and I'm conflicted about it because as I was reading the story, it felt like a 4 out of 5 5-star read. However, because the story stuck with me and I felt the kind of Stockholm syndrome feeling, the book started to feel more and more like a 5-star read. So I think I've put it somewhere toward a 4.5 stars. I am devastated that I read this before I read the prequel novella that will be coming out soon, or novel. I don't know if it's a novel or novella, but I need to know what goes down with a specific love story. I just really need that prequel immediately. But this was definitely one of the best books I read this year. It was my most anticipated release of the year, and I'm happy to say that it delivered. It wasn't everything that I wanted. Like, I still wanted more from Bewitched. However, I know that I am going to get much more as the series goes on. And my next favorite book series that I read this year is the Demon Queen Trials by C.N. Crawford. This book series totally surprised me. I went into this book series not knowing what to expect, and I ended up finding a favorite. City of Thorns was an okay story, but as the story progresses, oh my goodness, it gets so good. This is a rivals to lovers story, where essentially we are following a protagonist who is a doppelganger to the male love interest's arch nemesis, and he wants revenge. And as soon as he sees her, he wants to take her down, but she has no idea who he is at all. Rowan is an innocent, naive girl, and Orion just wants his revenge. What I like about the series is the dynamic between the two characters. You would think that based on the first book and the premise of the first book, that those two characters are rivals in one book, and then the relationship slowly starts to blossom from there, but no. They are rivals in every book in the series, and it reminds me of Jude and Cardan from The Cruel Prince. Because Jude and Cardan, as much as they had a rocky journey, when they reached their destination, it was all the more worth it, and that is what I felt with the Demon Queen Trials. This relationship dynamic is one I have not seen in quite some time, and it was one that was so refreshing, because as much as I love it when we have an instant relationship or some sort of relationship that happens over time, I kind of appreciate that there was an on and off thing going on between these two characters, and they were just fighting with each other throughout the series because they had different opinions and different morals, but that is what makes their relationship stronger in the long haul. Like, if they went through all this trial and tribulation in the early stages of their romance, just think about how they're gonna take on the world. I really hope that we get a spin-off series following these characters, or at least following their children, because oh my goodness, Rowan and Orion, their dynamic was excellent, and I just want to reread the series so bad because it was really good, and I want more people to read it. If you like new adult paranormal books, please pick up the Demon Queen Trials, and I cannot wait to read more by C.N. Crawford because they totally nailed the series. And the second last book that just made my favorites list only recently is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Yes guys, I finally read Fourth Wing and I love it. It's very interesting because I went into this book with very managed expectations, and I actually started it as soon as I finished Cherish by Tracy Wolff, but I had to put it down for a week or two after I finished the Crave series because it was a very intense read. Fourth Wing started off very intensively, and so my personal advice is that if you are planning to read Fourth Wing, probably don't read it straight after an intense paranormal or fantasy book series. Maybe just ease yourself into it slowly, because Fourth Wing starts off pretty intensely, but then it works its way up to a great story, and I'm so happy that I put it down at the time that I did, because if I continued on with this book straight away, I know that this book would not get the justice that it deserved. I'm gonna be honest, the one thing I don't love about Fourth Wing, and that I found a little bit cringy, was how many times Xaden called the protagonist Violence. I get it, her name is Violet, but like, it was an overused joke. I just felt like that kind of took me out of the story a lot, and it just gave me some cringe. That aside, the rest of the book was really good. It just felt so familiar. In my personal opinion, it gives me Dauntless Initiation vibes from Divergent, and I think that's what I liked about it a lot, and the relationship kind of reminded me of Fortress. In a way, it just felt that familiar to me, so I honestly felt like I was a kid again while reading this book, except of course there were some spicy scenes as well. So like a kid in a different way. It just felt nostalgic overall, except I was reading it almost 10 years after I read Divergent for the first time, so there's that. I kind of like how this story felt very familiar, and dragons. dragons. I love dragons. And speaking of dragons, the final book series that I have to mention on this list today is one that is full of dragons, and I love it. And that, my friends, is the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series by K.F. Breene. I love this series so much. Oh my goodness, you guys have no idea. So I met K.F. Breene at Babe, and I just had to gush to her about how much I appreciate that she did the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale justice. But she had her own spice and flair to it. She also signed my book right here. Yep, it's signed, it's personalized. I am a happy camper. K.F. Breene was the only author I brought like 4 books for because I found it really difficult to carry all my books through the event. However, with the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series, this is one of the best series I've read this year. I had to take all the books for her to sign, so I'm really happy that I did. I did not know, based on book 1 alone, that I was going to adore the series and that this series was going to be one of the best series I read this year. But as I proceeded on with A Throne of Ruin, which is the second book in the series, I fell in love. Oh my goodness. As soon as I finished A Throne of Ruin, I was shocked. I was like, oh my goodness, this series is going to be one of my favorites. And I'm so happy I continued on from there, because initially my goal was to read A Ruin of Roses before Babe and not read the rest of the series. But I'm so happy I devoured the rest of the series because I was able to tell K.F. Breene that she wrote one of the best reimaginings that I've ever read. And I thanked her personally for writing Nifane and writing him as like the best representation of beast I've ever seen. Nifane is my favorite beast ever. Beauty and the Beast was my favorite fairy tale growing up. Belle and the Beast were probably my first fictional ship ever. They probably have a big influence on my reading these days because I am starting to open up to more monster romances, and I have always wanted to find a Beauty and the Beast reimagining where I love the Beast, I find the Beast to be perfect, and I find that the Beast has some sort of character development journey of his own. And you know what? A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Curse So Dark and Lonely kind of ruined the idea of Beauty and the Beast reimaginings for me because I just don't see that happen that often. I mean, those are 2 very popular Beauty and the Beast reimaginings, so I could just be missing out on a few, but I picked this series up and I was really blown away by how K.F. Breene wrote Nifane. 100%, he's my favorite love interest I've read about this year. And I also very much appreciated following Finley, and I loved the side characters in the series. And K.F. Breene, while I was at the table, she teased that she's going to be writing more in this world. And I'm so excited. I got really, really excited. I'm still very excited. So I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for her to make an announcement. I'm just really happy with this first corner of the world, and I cannot wait to see where she's going to take these characters next. So that is going to be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the rose emoji because, I mean, I just talked about Beauty and the Beast, I just talked about A Ruin of Roses. It goes very well. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/GSwizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it in a double. Started out with half and I flipped it in a double.